Adam Peters is about to make the biggest call of the year, and it all revolves around Joey Porter Jr. with $120 million on the table. If he doesn't pull the trigger, Washington could come up short at corner. Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels keeps getting exposed game after game, and that could cost him the season. But there's a silver lining. Dan Quinn built a defense with Amick Robertson and Joshua Josephs that's already creating turnovers like never before, burgundy and gold style. I'll drop my prediction on all three. Raise hail. Okay, I need y'all to stop everything and listen, because this is the biggest thing that came out this week in the Commanders world, even though nobody's confirmed it yet. League insider Jordan Schultz dropped the bomb a couple days ago. Multiple teams around the NFL are wondering whether the Pittsburgh Steelers would be willing to let go of their star cornerback, Joey Porter Jr., for the right offer. That name isn't just anybody. We're talking about the son of Joey Porter, the Pittsburgh legend, a Pro Bowl caliber player who in 2025 allowed just a 56.2 passer rating when targeted, with 52 tackles, 14 passes defended, 1 sack, and 1 interception. That's the profile of a true number one cornerback that every team in this league dreams of having on the boundary. Let's lay out the full context here, because there are layers most people are skipping past. Porter's entering the final year of his rookie deal, a 4-year contract worth just under $10 million total. That means in 2027 he's an unrestricted free agent, and Pittsburgh still hasn't put a serious extension on the table. Why does that matter? Because the cornerback market exploded this offseason in a way nobody saw coming. Devin Witherspoon reset the market with Seattle at 4 years and $132 million, $33 million a year. Denzel Ward extended with Cleveland for $62.2 million over 2 years. Trent McDuffie is in that same $31 million plus conversation too. We're talking about a cornerback market that took off faster than teams themselves can keep up with. And in that context, a GM like Omar Khan in Pittsburgh, who runs on the organizational policy of not negotiating contracts during the season, is sitting there with a player of that caliber approaching free agency with nothing resolved. Now, here's where I gotta be the serious analyst and not just the excited fan, because minutes after Schultz's bomb dropped, another insider, Mark Kaboly, who covers the Steelers closely on the Pat McAfee show, came out and cooled the whole thing down. Kaboly said, word for word, that Pittsburgh hasn't gotten a single call asking about Porter, and hasn't made one either. And he added something even more direct. The Steelers have, in his words, zero interest in moving him, unless some crazy offer comes in, something like 2 first-round picks. So now we've got 2 serious sources from the same world saying almost opposite things. One says the whole league is eyeing Porter as a possible exit. The other says Pittsburgh straight up didn't pick up the phone. And this, man, is exactly the kind of situation where I'm not gonna lie to y'all and pretend I've got the definitive answer. I could be wrong, but my read is that both things are true at the same time, and they don't contradict each other as much as it looks. It's entirely possible that teams like Washington are monitoring the situation from a distance, doing their homework, asking around internally without it turning into a formal call yet, while Pittsburgh, which has zero obligation to sell off an asset at that level in August, simply shuts the door on the surface to avoid stirring up noise before the season starts. That doesn't mean the trade is dead, it means it hasn't really been born yet. Keep monitoring this, like the rumors say, because by the October trade deadline, the math can change completely if Pittsburgh starts slow or if Porter's extension is still unresolved. And now I want to put the real number on the table, because this is what makes this story so big. Nobody, not Schultz, not Kaboly, leaked a concrete figure for what it would cost to settle Porter's future. But do the math with me, using the same market comps we just walked through. The floor for elite cornerbacks right now sits around $30 million a year. That's roughly where McDuffie landed and close to where Ward moved. If Pittsburgh, or whoever trades for him, sits down to negotiate with Porter at that market floor, on a standard 4-year deal, we're talking about $120 million. And if the negotiation gets closer to the ceiling, Witherspoon set with Seattle, that number climbs even higher. $120 million is the realistic floor, not the ceiling. That's the math. That's the number y'all need to keep in your heads every time you hear the name Porter over the next few weeks. And it's exactly the size of the bet Washington would need to be willing to make if it really wants to solve its number 1 cornerback spot with a player of this caliber. Now let's get to what y'all actually care about. Why should Washington be one of the teams making that call? And there's no way around it here. Washington's secondary has a real hole at the cornerback spot opposite Marshon Lattimore, and that hole has a name, Trey Amos. The 2025 second-round pick came in with a huge projection. Some had him as the best rookie in that entire draft class. But since last November, he basically hasn't been able to practice at full go, dealing with a fractured fibula and an ankle sprain, and just yesterday, against the Lions, he was inactive again. Mike Sainristil still has a role, but he's coming off a rough season, and he's not a guaranteed starter for the full year. Amik Robertson and Rasul Douglas add depth, but neither one is the true #1 boundary cornerback that a Dan Quinn scheme needs to really compete against the top offenses in the conference. My personal take here is clear, and I want it on record for this channel for when we come back to this in October. If Trey Amos can't stay healthy through the regular season, and everything we've seen so far says that risk is real, Washington needs to be among the first calling Pittsburgh the moment any crack opens up in that extension negotiation. Not for September 1st, for the October trade deadline, once Pittsburgh knows whether this season is actually going somewhere or not, and once the pressure of resolving Porter's contract before losing him for nothing in 2027 starts to weigh for real. The obstacle, let's be honest, is the price. If Pittsburgh really is asking for 2 first-round picks, Adam Peters has to weigh whether it's worth emptying out the roster's future for one single position, no matter how critical it is. As a fan, I want that trade. As an analyst, I get why Peters is probably gonna think twice before paying that price. Both things can be true at once, and that tension is exactly what we're gonna keep tracking on this channel week after week. And I want to add one more thing, because this is what genuinely keeps me up at night when I think about this roster long term. Washington built a real clear identity under Adam Peters. Spend on the defensive front, spend on Jaden Daniels' weapons, and solve the secondary through internal development and mid-tier contracts instead of Pro Bowl names. That philosophy worked beautifully in 2024, but this league changes fast. And the cornerback market we just walked through proves that a good Dan Quinn scheme disguising coverages isn't enough anymore on its own. At some point, you need a true #1 cornerback, one who wins his one-on-one against the top receivers in the conference without help. And to this day, Washington doesn't have that guy locked in on the roster. Lattimore's there, but he's coming off a long career, and he isn't the same explosive player from his early years anymore. If Amos can't hold up, and Porter ever becomes available at a reasonable price, for me there's no thinking twice about it. That's the kind of bet that separates a team that competes for the title from one that just makes the playoffs and goes home early. I'd rather see Peters' overreach being aggressive than come up short from excessive caution, especially with Daniels' healthy window running in parallel. Alright man, that was today's big story, and I promise we're gonna keep tracking it. Before I move on to the offensive line, I want to leave one last thought on Porter, because I think it sums up why this channel exists. A lot of people are gonna see Kaboli's headline, "Zero interest," and just move on thinking there's nothing here. I'd rather sit a second longer in that discomfort of uncertainty, because that's exactly where roster moves actually get cooked up in this league. Nobody confirms a trade in August. They confirm it in October, when desperation or opportunity line up. Save this segment, because in 2 months we're gonna come back to it. Now I gotta go back to something that's been nagging at me since yesterday, because it didn't get solved, and honestly it worries me even more after sitting with it. Dan Quinn had been crystal clear. The condition for Jaden Daniels to play against the Lions was the health of the guys around him on the line. Under that same standard, Daniels went out there, took his reps, and on his second play he ended up on the ground, sacked for a 10-yard loss. It's not that Daniels played bad, nobody's saying that. The problem is structural, and it's the same one we've been calling out since July with the Laramie Tunsil triceps injury. What's really got me in panic mode isn't the sack itself. Sacks happen. It's preseason. It's that it wasn't just some backup losing his assignment. It was John Bates, a tight end Washington specifically brings on the field to block, who blew it and left Daniels exposed. And on top of that, starting center Nick Allegretti wasn't even out there, missing most of camp with a calf strain. That line that took the field today, with Allegretti out and with the issues we've already been carrying since Tunsil, is basically the same one that's going to take the field September 13th against Philadelphia. That's not a throwaway sample. That's the real one, and I want to put this in a bigger picture because it speaks to a whole roster building philosophy. Adam Peters invested hard in offensive weapons and in the defense this offseason, but the offensive line stayed the unfinished project. Tunsil came in to solve left tackle, and weeks later, he's in doubt because of that injury. Taylor Decker is still stuck in free agent limbo, with Washington not making any real move. And while those two pieces stay unresolved, the center spot, the position that in theory should be the most stable, is the one that left us with zero protection today. That pileup of uncertainty across a whole unit right when we need it to be the most solid is the real problem. And I want to be even more specific about what worries me the most here. This isn't one isolated game. This is the third time in under a month that this same offensive line group in different combinations of starters and backups has left a Washington quarterback exposed because of a blown assignment, whether it's Daniels, Hartman, or any of the backups. And here's where I have to stay cold with this, instead of just riding the emotion. Preseason results don't always predict the regular season, but when the same pattern keeps repeating game after game, with different names blowing the same assignment, that's not August noise anymore. It's a real trend that needs solving before September 3rd, especially thinking about the elite defensive fronts Washington's about to face once the real schedule starts, beginning with Philadelphia. What gives me a little hope is that there's still the joint practice against the Ravens on Wednesday. That's where Daniels and the starting offense go up against Baltimore with more reps against a tougher opponent, and Dan Quinn's staff can actually isolate what's really breaking down in that line's communication. That's going to be the real thermometer. If it keeps giving up pressure there, today's panic turns into something a lot more serious. And I'll be straight with y'all because that's why you're here with me. I've been defending this roster since the Daniels draft, and I don't love being the one bringing bad news, but I've covered this team long enough to recognize a pattern when I see one, and this is a pattern. It's not one player having an off day. It's the third time in under a month we've heard some version of the same line. The O-line is still finding itself. At some point, that phrase stops being reasonable patience and turns into denial. I'd rather say it now, in August, while there's still time to fix it with a joint practice and scheme adjustments, than stay quiet and have to explain to y'all in October why Daniels is back on the injury list. That's literally the job of this channel. I needed to get that off my chest, but on the other side of the ball, the exact opposite happened, and that's got me excited. And honestly, man, after all these years asking for this defense to have some character, I can't help but smile at what I saw today. Remember this stat, Washington finished 2025 nearly dead last in the league in takeaways, ahead of only the Jets. On the second play of today's game, Amik Robertson came in unblocked on a blitz, ate up quarterback Josh Dobbs, and ripped the ball right out of his hands. Joshua Josephs, the fifth-round rookie, fell on it in the end zone for the afternoon's first defensive touchdown. Second play of the game, touchdown on defense. 6 plays later, Quan Martin stole another pass Dobbs never should have thrown across his own body, his second interception in 2 weeks of preseason, when in his entire career before that, he only had 3. And the pressure didn't let up with the backups. TJ Maguranyanga sacked Luke Altmaier for a 9-yard loss. Javonte Jean-Baptiste added his own. In total, 5 combined sacks on Dobbs and Altmaier, who between them only put up 110 passing yards on 16 completions. That Robertson blitz wasn't an accident. It came off a coverage disguise that left Dobbs' protectors completely wrong about where the pressure was coming from. Exactly the kind of leverage a coordinator out of the Seattle coaching tree tries to create. But let's be honest, the run defense, especially with the reserve units, took a beating. The Lions ran for 157 yards with a 6.8 yards per carry average through the first 3 quarters against running backs who weren't even Detroit stars. My read is the first team defense showed a completely different version from 2025, but that same level of discipline didn't hold up with the backups, and that's where Dan Quinn has real work to do before roster cuts. The question isn't whether this starting defense can be one of the best in the conference. It's already proving that it can. The question is how deep that identity runs once the game gets decided with injuries in the mix in the back half of the season. And I want to close this one out with something I think is important to say out loud, because sometimes as fans we struggle to separate the excitement from the cold analysis. This starting defense playing like this, generating 2 turnovers and 5 combined sacks in less than a full game, is exactly the kind of identity Washington needed after a 2025 with 0 defensive character. That's real, and I'm celebrating it with everything I've got, but I'm also aware we're talking about preseason, against mostly Detroit's reserve units, without Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown on the field. My job here is to recognize the real progress on display, and at the same time, remind y'all that the real test comes when we face starting caliber offenses from the conference with everything on the line. That's when we'll know if this defensive identity holds up, or if it was just a good August afternoon. Alright, there it is. A trade rumor that could redefine the secondary if Pittsburgh ever actually picks up that phone for real. An offensive line that's still unresolved and has me genuinely in panic mode. And a defense finding its identity play after play with a crack still left to fix. Oh, and before I forget, remember the name Athan Kaliakmanis, the 7th round backup quarterback playing his heart out on every snap who might just steal himself a spot on the final roster. We'll get into that in full detail soon. This franchise keeps building its contention window with Daniels dead center of everything, and every piece of this puzzle, Porter, the line, the defense, matters way more than a preseason score suggests. And I want to end by being real clear about why I build these videos the way I do, mixing the hype with the hard criticism in the same script, because a real fan doesn't choose between celebrating and worrying. You do both at the same time, all the time, for the whole season. I still believe in Adam Peters, I still believe in Dan Quinn, but believing doesn't mean staying quiet when something genuinely worries me, and it doesn't mean pretending everything's bad when the defense proves me wrong in the same afternoon. That balance is what this channel's gonna hold all season, whether y'all like each week's result or not. Raise hail, always. If this video did something for you, hit the like, subscribe, and tell me down below. Would y'all call Pittsburgh about Porter even if it costs 2 first-round picks, or you'd rather Washington sit tight? I'm reading every single one of you. See y'all in the next one.